Why do we feel like something's missing? Why do we feel a sense of lack? Why do we struggle to feel fulfilled? Why do we chase after certain experiences, substances, instant gratification to give us an illusion that we are fulfilled for the moment? In a way, we are running away from this sense of lack. Why do we do this? What's going on, guys? This is Hassan from The Spiritual Walks. I hope everyone is doing absolutely amazing. On this channel, we talk about spirituality, self-development, because we are all on a journey towards the truth. For a big part of my life, I constantly felt this perpetual sense of lack, as though something's missing. Whatever I do, I could not be fulfilled. And so I'd constantly chase after instant gratification, some type of pleasure, substances, different experiences, just so that I can fill up that void. But really all I'm doing is I'm distracting myself away from realizing that there is a void. We always resort to these different distractions because we don't want to address the elephant in the room. We don't want to address that there is this feeling. Regardless of wherever we go, if we just sit still, eventually this feeling will come up. It's a way of communication. It's a way of rebellion within yourself. It is telling you the number one reason why you are feeling this sense of lack. And the reason is ignorance. Ignorance is the number one reason why we feel like something is constantly missing. Because when we look at ignorance, if there is no such thing as ignorance, there's a natural openness. And I'd like to think that ignorance comes about not because we don't know something. Ignorance comes about because we have consciously established a particular conclusion that stops us now from exploring a different angle perspective so that we may learn new things. Somewhere down the line, across all of our life, across all of this conditioning, this development of our self-beliefs, opinions, and so on, we are constantly signing contracts and abiding by particular beliefs or particular realizations, retain them in the form of memory and hold on to them, crystallize them. And then what happens is that anything that is not in alignment with what we have now retained must be wrong or must not be superior. So in other words, the more we introduce different establishments and developments of conclusions and belief systems, the more we introduce ignorance in this vast mystery that we call life. And so we find ourselves in this perpetual loop. We create conclusions so that we can finally retain a realization, so that we feel like we are at the peak of the mountain. But as we retain conclusions and create conclusions in life and belief systems, we close off everything else. So this is now a placeholder that is closed. We cannot be flexible with this. We cannot learn something new here. We cannot develop this. It's now a closed system. This is how things are. It's either my way or the highway. And so if there is just one highway, one particular path, it kind of becomes mundane. It just becomes routine. Life becomes boring. Life starts to lack substance, and so we go and chase after substances. We chase after experiences. We chase after pleasures because we feel like pleasure is now the reason why we are alive. We have concluded, we have closed off the roads of exploration to discover something more vast and beautiful and more mystical perhaps. We've closed that road off. So now all there is just pleasures. And so throughout my life, as I was reflecting on this for weeks, months on end, and realizing that ignorance is the cause for the sense of lack in my life, I also realized that I don't need to do anything externally to try and succumb and get rid of the ignorance. Now, getting rid of ignorance does not mean that you now know everything. No, it just means that there is a natural sense of openness to life. This is what we want. We just want this sense of openness, because as we are closed, we are also locking ourselves in. But as there is a natural sense of openness, we feel more liberated, we feel more light. And so the number one way to actually overcome ignorance is to become conscious of it. We've got to see our own ignorance. And that is something that is extremely difficult to admit to ourselves. Our whole life, we are conditioned to protect this, to protect our ego, to protect our identity, to protect our belief systems, to protect our tribe, our nations, our religion, our color, our profession, our career, our opinions, our likes and dislikes, our everything. We are trying to protect that. But if only we admit that there is the slightest bit of ignorance that is really stopping us from flourishing in life. If we just admit that, something beautiful and magical starts to happen in your life. There is once again this sense of openness. And as you start to feel this sense of openness, you also feel that it's extremely familiar, because it's the type of openness you used to have as a child when you were young. Really, what is the difference between you right now and you maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, when you were 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years old? What is the difference? The only difference is that you've just made up or created or retained more conclusions. That's all it is. And so the beauty in being conscious of our own ignorance is almost like we are shedding the light on this ignorance, which then allows it to dissolve. And so then we should recognize that what we truly seek is liberation and openness. Once again, we chase different experiences and substances to make us feel as though there is this openness. And this actually kind of reminds me of something else. It shows us that it's so detrimental to be judgmental, to have very strong opinions. It's not detrimental to the person who receives the judgment from us. It's detrimental to us who create and adhere and abide by the judgment that we've just created. In a way, being judgmental is almost like our own intelligence is working against us. Because as we are being judgmental, we have taken an opinion and we have made this opinion our focal point. We have honed in and warped our entire perspective so that we see life through that judgment, through that opinion. And this is such a narrow tunnel vision type of perspective. It's almost like we are viewing life through a keyhole, where in this case ignorance is the rest of the door that surrounds the keyhole. When we discover this, we discover that, hey, there's a whole door to open up and see through. And so imagine this whole time you're interpreting your life through the perception of a keyhole, the perspective of a keyhole, when there is so much more. And so then when you go back to looking at how you create judgments and opinions about certain matters externally or internally, you begin to realize that these judgments aren't holistic. There is a lot of ignorance attached to these judgments. And so we realize that there's so much to life than this small petty judgment that we have created. And so really, to wrap this up, if we just understand the dynamics that links ignorance to the feeling of sense of lack that we have, and if we also realize that ignorance is born out of our conditioning over time, our conclusions that we create and retain, our belief systems over time, if we understand these dynamics, we begin to also understand that becoming conscious of ignorance takes us back to the state of openness, in which we are actually more primed to learn more about life. We are primed to experience life to a deeper capacity rather than filtering life through the lenses of our conclusions and belief systems. And so I really urge you to take your time to reflect on your life. Observe your life, observe your activities. The more you do this, the more you realize subtle aspects and habits and thought patterns that take place within you that could keep you in an ignorant kind of cycle or place. And so really all we want to do is become conscious of this ignorance so that the light of consciousness burns and dissolves ignorance, so that all that there remains is your natural state of being, a natural sense of openness. The natural sense of openness you have the right to feel and experience, and that you are born with. Now I really hope that this conversation has given you some insight Because if you did, I'm pretty sure that you will also like this video over here. We share a lot of different ideas in this video as well that hopefully can be impactful in your life in one way or another. But aside from that, thank you so much for watching. This is Hassan from The Spiritual Walks, and we are on a journey towards the truth.